You don't have to. You don't have to speak if you don't want to.
Morning.
Huh?
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Good evening. I'm in the UK, by the way, in case you didn't guess. Almost dinner time. Okay. Hi there, Carol. Hi, Teresa. Good. Do you want to let people in, Michael?
Everybody's in. We'll see if we have a couple late joiners.
Well, it comes up on my screen for some reason, so I know straight away. So there you are. I think it'd be good to start off with a refuge prayer, Michael. Sangye cheta soge chonam la chancho bata tani kyab suchi dagi jinso ge peso nangi chola penche sangi chobara jo. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. We spend a few minutes thinking about the meaning of that, in particular trying to generate the attitude of bodhicitta, the awakening mind, the mind that wants to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So, hello again, everybody. Oh, hi there, Talia. And everybody that's I can see and I can't see, welcome. We have 8 classes in this module, I guess you can call it. Anyway, we've been going through the stage of the path to full awakening using the middle length stage of path composed by Lama Tsongkhapa. And so where we've got to is, well, the section that talks about the Four Noble Truths, as we usually call them, the Four Noble Truths. So this involves looking at the nature of cyclic existence, samsara, nirvana, which is liberation from cyclic existence. So it's the opposite of cyclic existence. This all comes up when you're going through the Four Truths. And it is also very nice because it talks about the mental afflictions, states of mind that afflict us, cause us so much suffering, like grasping attachment and anger and jealousy, and especially not understanding our own true nature, which seems to be really at the bottom of everything, all of our problems, which is an interesting idea, really. And where we left off, in the, I don't know, around September, October last year, we had been finding out about karma. Of course, there's just so much more that we could have, gone into. Maybe I probably said pretty well as much as I know about karma, but it's a very deep subject. It's a very deep subject, and yet there are certain things that are quite simple. Really, I guess the essence, the message of karma is when you do good things, then good things happen to you. When you do bad things are going to happen. Simple as that, really. So then it's some things are kind of obvious, like killing and stealing and cheating people and lying and so on. The idea is quite straightforward, but then often, when you start really thinking about it, then, so actually I did a 1-month course at Kopan in Nepal. And it's funny, really, because it's with the topic of karma that everybody's like, but what if this and what if that and what about this kind of thing? It gets really complicated. Other things are not so complicated. Oh. Can we change the view so that I can have everybody, like the Hollywood squares, as they call it, please?
I think you can just click on gallery.
You can, you mean? When I click on gallery, I'm not sure I can do that. It might be possible. Oh yeah, I can. Yeah, then if I drag it across, yeah. Thank you, yes. Yeah, that works. Yeah. So sometimes it seems like what makes it complicated, what makes karma complicated is our own complicated minds. But that might be also oversimplifying things. So I thought spend a few minutes just talking about some of the main things about karma, just to see, just to see, kind of reminder. So one of the first things in the part of this text that talks about karma is, and usually, talking about karma, that the lamas, our teachers, talk about the four characteristics of karma. Does that ring a bell? For people that have been following this, it ought to ring a bell. So, okay, does anybody remember what the first one is? Okay, so some of you might be new to this, so don't worry if you haven't got an answer, but if somebody has an answer, what the first one would be, the four general features of karma. What's the first one?
Is the first one that karma is certain?
Yeah, well done.
Hey, imagine that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and she put her hand up as well. That's good. Yeah, karma is certain. It's karma is certain. I think lengeba. So it's when we say karma is certain, what that mainly is, well, another way of putting it would be there's something fixed about karma. And what's fixed about it is that it's like, well, anyway, you do if you do something really kind of like nasty and something destructive, something unpleasant, harmful to another person, then the only possible outcome of that, in terms of like the result of that action, would be suffering. Would never be happiness. That's not the way that you're going to be happy. And the opposite also, when you do good things, helping people, generous, kind, and so on, then that would never lead to suffering. In terms of the karma, the result of that karma, it would never be, suffering. It would only be happiness. If you really think about this, though, some questions could still come up, and maybe they will do. But anyway, that's the general idea. Karma is definite, or karma is fixed. So the way it says it in the text, usually, virtue only leads to happiness and never leads to suffering, and non-virtue only leads to suffering and it never leads to happiness. So the main cause of the happiness that we want is doing good things. So because you want to be happy, I mean, we all want to be happy. So then we have to make sure to do good things. So finding out what good things are. And like I say, some of those things are pretty obvious, but it's not always. So it's good to read about these things, learn about these things. And so, so if you want the happiness that you want, then it means to get that, then it means doing good things. And then, of course, we don't have to worry about, so if you want suffering, it doesn't work exactly like that. If you want suffering, then you have to create, do nasty things. Well, it doesn't mean that. Because we don't want suffering, then better make sure to avoid the cause of suffering, because you know. Otherwise, we'll have to experience that suffering as a result. So anyway, that's pretty much it generally about karma is definite. What about the next one?
I have a question about that, Venerable Steve, if that's okay.
Yeah, okay, yeah, but yeah,
Can
okay,
I
yeah.
ask very
Sure.
quickly? I mean, that's a question I've always had. So sometimes I do things that aren't good. They're just not positive, actually. And then later on, I'm kind of grateful that I did them. I could see that maybe they worked out. So anyway, that's my question.
Yeah, so I think I know what you're getting at. So this is where you need to make a sort of distinction between the thing is, if it was actually something like let's say killing, let's say saying something nasty to somebody, I mean, so something which was, as you say, something quite bad, then unless you purify that, and there are ways of purifying, right? So that's one of the things that comes up with karma, the ways to purify with the four opponent powers, then you're definitely going to experience suffering as a result of that. But that doesn't mean to say that you can't learn from what you did. Like, for example, when you're ill, well, that would be because of having done something destructive, either early on in this life or perhaps more likely some previous life. But you can learn from that. When you're experiencing that that pain, then that will make you think. If you've a mind to sort of like work with it, that'll make you think, well, this obviously this suffering I'm experiencing is obviously the result of something bad I did in the past. So since I don't like this kind of experience and I don't want to experience this kind of thing in the future, I better make sure to avoid doing the kind of thing that's going to lead to this kind of suffering. So you can learn from it. And likewise, I mean, I'm just trying to think. I mean, you didn't give a concrete example, but it is sometimes a case that, I don't know. I mean, sometimes you might say something unpleasant to somebody, and then they get upset, and then you talk it through with each other, and then you become best friends. So it's like something good that happened because of something bad, but you wouldn't call the bad thing the cause of that good thing happening. It's like a cooperative condition for it to happen. So we make that kind of distinction. So in other words, when we say karma is definite, we're talking really about what um, good deeds, if you like, are the cause of happiness, but they can be the condition for experiencing suffering, and the other way around too. I mean, I don't know. Like, for example, you give away all your money with a pure motivation, pure heart, good heart, give away all your money. So then what happens? You're poor. You got nothing to eat, nothing to drink. But in terms of the karma, that act of generosity, especially if it's done with a pure motivation, then that's the cause of only happiness, not the cause of suffering. You see the difference? Okay.
Got it. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. So then what about the second general feature of karma then?
Karma
So
increases.
karma increases. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay. There's some agreement to that. Yes, that's right. So yeah, karma increases. And so, I mean, and they always say, like, just like in the external world, you got little a little seed can grow into a huge tree. So just like that, small actions that seem very insignificant on the positive and negative side, they can lead to huge results. And I was reading about, not about this, but anyway, I was reading something about something, some of you might have heard of it. It's called collapsology. Collapsology. Here's a field as the study of how everything can break down. The whole everything, like the whole of society and the whole of everything about everything, just civilization just breaking down, how it can happen, how it can all collapse, collapsology. And now I can't remember. But anyway, they do talk about these the possibility of some tiny change, tiny thing goes wrong, which is like such a small thing that nobody would notice the just wouldn't even notice it, but actually it has this knock-on effect which can bring about a huge disaster. Yeah, Shana?
Is that like the butterfly effect?
I think it's like that. Yeah, right. It's like the butterfly effect, and there's, for people who like science fiction, it's like going back into the past and I don't know, maybe it's the same thing, treading on a butterfly, and then you go back to where you came from, and like everything's changed. The whole world's completely different. Maybe no human beings left or whatever. Anyway, yeah. So tiny thing leading to a great result. So it's like that, So what that means is, in terms of destructive actions, don't deceive yourself into thinking that like that was just such a tiny little thing, it doesn't matter, and you just forget about it. But actually it can lead to a huge disastrous life result in your life, or I mean, maybe especially in future lives. And it works in the other way as well, that so even the slightest negative karma, if you like, we want to avoid, and even the slightest positive action that you think is so insignificant, so small, it's not worth doing, actually it is worth doing, because it could lead to really huge results. That's how it works with karma. Karma increases. And what about the third one? Okay, so
Can't experience what you haven't created.
that's right. Yeah, that's the third one. So yeah, so anyway, you won't meet with the results of a karma that you haven't done, an action you haven't done, And what's important about that? Is, you see, it's different when you're thinking about the positive karma and the negative karma. With the positive karma, it's like you think that you want to be happy. Of course, we want to be happy. We all want to be happy. But you think you're going to be happy if you don't do anything. It's just not. It's just a fantasy. You're kidding yourself. You think that could be that could be possible. So in other words, since I'll never experience the result of something I've never done, and what I want is happiness, I'd better go about doing those things which are going to lead to happiness. So, at this level, when you're talking about karma, it means like doing good deeds and so on. And otherwise, in general, it means follow the path, practicing the whole path, the path of teachings of the Buddha taught. If you do that, then you'll achieve enlightenment. You're not going to get it just by sitting there twiddling your thumbs. And then also, with the destructive actions, negative action, negative karma, it's like you don't need to worry that you're going to experience suffering as a result of things you never even did. So you don't have to worry about that. But I suppose the main thing is, it's the lesson is or what's implied is, if you want to be happy, then you're gonna have to make create the causes for it. Otherwise it'll never happen. Then the fourth one. Somebody. So the fourth one is that once you have, if we keep using the word karma, once you've created, once you've accumulated, as they say, a karma, like for example, killing, like for example, freeing sentient beings, animals, and so on that be condemned to death. So giving life. Once they've been done, then no matter how much time has passed, in the case of the good actions, if it hasn't been destroyed by anger, then one day it might be it might be a next lifetime, it might be 100 lifetimes, it might be eons and eons from now, but it'll just, that seed, that potential will remain there, and eventually you'll experience the result. So karma is never lost, is a sort of a simple way of putting it. Karma is never lost. So that works with any kind of karma. And so I think this really is the teaching there is, you might feel like it's only really the things you can remember that count. Past lives, we can't remember past lives. It just seems it's just so long ago. How could there be anything left for you to experience a result of that? But actually, it's not like that. It doesn't work like that. According to the teachings on karma, it doesn't work like that. The result is never lost. With the negative karma, if you purify it, then you won't have to experience that result. In the case of positive karma, by getting angry, if the karma hasn't been dedicated, if that good deed, that good action hasn't been dedicated properly, then in a moment of anger you can destroy so much good karma, and then it's like seeds which have been burnt up. They're still there, but they can't grow into anything good. They can't grow into anything good. Anger is very destructive. Okay, so anyway, talking about anger, that comes up a bit in this section, talking about the four truths, one old truth. Also comes up a bit in the next part of the text when we look at the Bodhisattva path. So there you've got the 6 perfections, including the perfection of patience, or some call it forbearance, some call tolerance, Sapa. Anyway, so maybe that's enough about karma. Okay. So what I've been doing and what I'll continue to do is going through the book, reading through it, and explaining it. That's what we've been doing so far. That was the aim from the beginning, rather than just giving a general idea like we would if if we're just spending an evening or 2 on it. Just give a general idea. So we've got 8 evenings for this. I think there's a good chance we'll be able to finish this, and then maybe we'll have a few extra classes, I think, for going through the 12 links of dependent origination, the wheel of life, that picture. That's always nice to go through. I've always found it useful. Something I've always liked thinking about and reading about and so on. Okay. So the transition from the previous part of the text to this part of the text. So previously, mainly we were looking at what we called practices in common with the person of small capacity or small capability. The person of small capability is the one that's only interested in their next life, not interested in liberation from cyclic existence, not interested in enlightenment, but only interested in then the next life, having a good future life. And that those are considered to be practices that are in common with the person who wants to follow mainly who's interested in following the bodhisattva path and achieving enlightenment. And the simple reason, maybe there are other reasons, but the simple reason for that is that if you want to achieve enlightenment, well, it would be nice, of course, if we could do it just like with no effort and super quick kind of thing, fast track and all that. But you kind of got to assume that it's probably going to take many lifetimes. So that means that you need to have a good life after good life after good life, which is a life that supports that where it's possible to keep going with this practice life. So, for example, well, I mean, the worst thing about the karma is, the worst results are being born in the lower realms, like as an animal and so on, where you have so much suffering that you just have no possibility of, you wouldn't even think about it. Like if you're a dog, I mean, dogs are just amazing. I mean, they're lovely creatures, but if you could be His Honor's Dalai Lama, and His Honor Dalai Lama could be teaching you day in, day out, and you just wag your tail at the most, right? I mean, they just don't understand what you're saying. They can understand certain things, and they've got a certain kind of intelligence that you hear about, and maybe if you've got dogs, then you know about it. But actually understanding, like the whole idea of following a spiritual path and so on, it's just not possible. And then there are also, of course, many forms of life which are all possible where you wouldn't even hear about spiritual path. Even as humans, there are many people that don't hear, that spend their lives living in the jungle. Of course, that's getting less and less. But anyway, so the point is, there's a certain kind of life that is the best for being able to keep going with this project. And so you need to be careful with karma. So you need that, So then, but so the thing is, with those practices alone, so we're talking about, the kind of meditation topics, practice topics that have we've already looked at, the way, how to find a qualified guide, teacher who can show you the path, teaching as much as possible from experience, somebody who kind of lives what they teach and really knows about what it is that you need to find out. That's the main thing, isn't it? And then about the precious human life and meditating on death and the fact that death is certain. When death is going to happen, we just don't know. The time of death is uncertain. And the only thing that's really going to help you at that time, and especially as you go through that transition, is what you've done with your life, really. You can't take, you can't take anything with you, like they say. You can't take it with you, and it's not going to help you. In other words, you can't pay not to die. You might be the richest person in the world, but that money can't stop you from dying. Can't even stop you from getting ill, actually. I mean, of course, you know, if you've got plenty of money, you can afford good insurance, and so you can avoid certain things, but, you know, no guarantee, is there? No guarantee. It's very sad, but it's a fact. Yeah, so anyways, yep. You can't, and then, you know, no matter how many friends you've got, you might even have you might, I know, some kind of president with a whole army, but they can't protect you from death, and you won't be able to take them with you. So just like we come into this life with nothing, come into this life with absolutely nothing. So everything we have has been accumulated since then. So in the same way, you know, we go with nothing. The Tibetans used the example of, you know, the pulling a hair out of butter. It's not a very nice idea, actually. But anyway, when you pull a hair out of butter, you know, it doesn't take a lump of butter with it. It's just the hair comes out by itself. So like that, we go with nothing. So the only thing really is gonna, you know, what you've done with your life, your frame of mind while you're dying. But then, you know, so what that means is being in a positive state. But how are you going to be in a positive state of mind when you die if you've spent your whole life, you know, doing nothing worthwhile and only destructive actions? I mean, it's very difficult to imagine being in a positive state. And then, and then having spent all that time just creating negative karma, not purifying anything that you've done in past lives, then, you know, there's not much chance really, but to go on to a bad life after you die. Whereas if you've, you know, if you've purified and you've done use your time in as positive way as you can, then there's more chance you're going to be in a positive state of mind, and there's more chance that the karma that's going to be, you know, that you're going to be following, in a sense, is going to be karma that makes you go on to a good future life. So that's what it means when we say, you know, only Dharma. It's only your Dharma practice. It's only what you've done with your life that really helps. And then after that, you know, refuge, and then the karma, going for refuge, and then all about karma. So that's that's the minimum you need for somebody who wants to, who's only interested in their next life. But even for us also, since it's important what kind of life we have after this one, we do need those practices as well. But there's nothing ultimate about them, though, those practices, because through those practices alone, you know, if you just do those practices, then you can guarantee a good future life. But number one, just practicing those doesn't mean you're going to have a good life forever, like life after life after life after life, forever. And also, even if you're born as a human again, which is best, there's still a lot of suffering for human beings. There's so much suffering, as we know from our own experience and just reading news, watching the news, we know about that. So it's not enough. So so in other words, like wherever you go after this life, and in the life after that, the life after that, what it comes down to is, as long as you haven't, well, in one way of putting it, until you're free of cyclic existence, you're still in cyclic existence, in a sense, and that means you're still going to suffer. another way of looking at it is the real problem is the mental afflictions, especially ignorance. And if you haven't dealt with that, then you're left with their counterparts, the negative minds, the destructive states. And because of those, what you're going to do is destructive, and therefore you're going to end up suffering again and again and again. So that's why that's the main point of the Four Truths, the reason the Buddha taught the Four Truths, and why we want to find out about them and try to integrate the meaning of that teaching into our practice, because that's the way to find lasting peace and happiness. So that's the theory anyway, and so that's what that's the point of these classes, finding out about the Four Truths. Okay. So anyway, in this text, well, in my book anyway, it's page 153, starts off talking about suffering. So anyway, let's talk a bit about the Four Truths, just some general stuff. So the Four Truths, well, I'm sure everybody knows what they are, right? You probably all know what they are. But anyway, so the truth of suffering, the truth of the origin of suffering, then the truth of the cessation of suffering, and the truth of the path to the cessation of suffering. And these four, it's quite interesting actually, because so the first two, to basically the cause and effect of the suffering that we don't like. Then the last two are the cause and effect on the side of the happiness that we want. The suffering that we don't like, but we're experiencing all the time, where that comes from. And then the cause, the happiness that we want, actually happiness that we've never even imagined was possible, but somehow, we all want happiness. So, it's that when you talk about the truth of cessation, then, we're talking about like the peace of mind and genuine happiness, lasting happiness of liberation and enlightenment, which is, like really unimaginable. The happiness that we want, and then the truth of the path, how to achieve that. So that's, in other words, the truth of suffering, that's what we don't want. The truth of the origin is why we suffer. The truth of the cessation, that's the happiness that we do want. And then the truth of the path, that's how you get that happiness and that peace. So apparently the way the Buddha taught it, there is a Four Noble Truths Sutra. Actually, it'd be nice to read that one day. I have that somewhere. Yeah, actually. Well, anyway, no, too distracting. So yeah, I've got. We should better get that, the Four Noble Truths Sutra. So it talks about the way that the Buddha taught the Four Truths, and in general, this is something you hear again and again when you listen to teachings on the Four Truths. The Buddha said, I think this is probably simplifying it a bit, but anyway, I don't know. So the Buddha said, this is suffering, which is true for an Arya. Then he said, this is the origin, which is true for an Arya. This is the cessation, which is true for an Arya. This is the path, which is true for an Arya. Okay, so Arya, usually we aria. I'm trying to remember what we usually say. The English word we use, aria. The thing is, anyway, because we talk about the Four Noble Truths, right? And I know I should know better, but I also always, it's just habit, the Four Noble Truths, like four truths which are noble. But that's not the point. That's actually missing the point. There actually the way that if I remember correctly, the way Alex Burton translates, four facts seen as true by Arias. By well, I know he probably doesn't say Arias. I can't remember what he says. The thing is, an aria, an aria is a kind of person or kind of being, and specifically, it's a being that has a direct realization of, or insight into, or perception of emptiness. In other words, the ultimate nature of reality, ultimate truth. So one who started off, just like us, not understanding at all, then learning about it, and gradually coming to an understanding, and the understanding becoming more and more refined until we would say, oh yeah, this person has realized, at this point you've realized emptiness, meaning you've got this deep, unshakable understanding, a real understanding of emptiness, truth, whatever. And but then at the beginning, it's still going to be conceptual. In other words, it's like like the difference between this is often the example that's used. When you actually so we're all at home, aren't we? So it's not very easy. Okay, I know. Let's say, so everybody's at home. So the difference between your perception, the way that you see your room while you're there, right? And let's say this would be easy. If you've got your eyes open and you look around the room, right? Now, if you close your eyes and think about your room, the room that you're in. So when you've got your eyes closed, you're still thinking about the room. So that what you're thinking about is still your room. And you have some kind of image of it in your mind, don't you? But it's not as clear as when you've got your eyes open, you can actually see it, right? So that's the difference between a direct perception and a conceptual realization or conceptual understanding of something. Okay. So it's like that. In the beginning, you would have a good understanding, a flawless understanding of emptiness, the ultimate nature of reality, but still conceptual. Then you keep meditating, and eventually it become a direct perception. So then it would be a much clearer understanding. Before that, people might say, oh yeah, he has a very clear understanding. She has a very good understanding, very clear understanding. But that's a bit different. Now it's become the difference. The difference would be like the difference between seeing something with your own eyes and seeing it when you're, it's some distance away and you're just thinking about it. So it's like that. So that's an Arya being. So somebody who's not an Arya being, who doesn't have that kind of direct perception, then is called an ordinary being. And of course, I can't tell, looking at you, if you're an Arya or an ordinary being, can I? The thing is, you see, if you were to say to me, Of course I'm not an Arya being. Of course I'm an ordinary being. Then I'd be thinking to myself, well, you would say that, wouldn't you? Usually it's the people that don't know that are saying that would say they do know. But of course, also there's no guarantee. If you say to me, if you would say to me, I don't, never mind direct perception, I don't even understand emptiness at all, then I might think to myself, yeah, probably. So anyway, the point isn't what people think of us really, is it? That's not the point. Anyway, I'm just joking. So anyway, that's Arya, an Arya being. An Arya being. So an Arya being is somebody who has a real good grasp of reality, right? Very good grasp. So so when the Buddha taught the Four Truths, they were there were things that could be easily seen by Arya beings as being true. Ordinary people might find it difficult to see the truth, especially in the beginning, and might even say, no, that's rubbish. It's not like that. So these are four things that are seen as true by Aryas. They're true for Aryas. Other people might disagree, but anyway, for an Arya being, they would hear this and think, oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, I can see that's true. So it doesn't mean to say we can't think about it, but that's what they're called. That's as far as I know, that's what I understand. Okay, so four noble truths is a little bit of a, what would you call it, a misnomer. It's a bit misleading, because when we talk about the noble truth of suffering, it's not like the suffering is noble. The truth of suffering that the Buddha taught is noble. It's true for a noble being. And this is just like an old translation. I don't know where it came from. I keep trying to remember. Arya beings, ordinary beings. I think we usually just say Arya beings and then have to explain what it means. I can't think of a word other than the old term, noble. Noble being. Because, Pagpa generally has the idea of somebody exceptional, somebody very special. Well, it makes sense, doesn't it? So ordinary versus what? What's the opposite of ordinary? Extraordinary. Yeah. Ordinary beings versus extraordinary beings. Anyway, whatever. You get the idea, I think. You get the idea. So, four facts seen as true, or four things seen as true by Aryas. That's what it means when we say the Four Noble Truths. Yeah. So then also quite often when we talk about the truth of suffering, it often gets shortened to true suffering, which is also a little bit misleading, because it's not that the suffering is true, it's more a question of what Buddha taught about suffering is true. And so again, you might disagree. Well, that's just because you're an ordinary being. If you're an Arya being, then you would agree. Okay. It's a bit like that. Okay, but it doesn't mean that this is how, like the Buddha, this is how Buddha would have argued. Like anybody that disagrees with him, oh well, obviously you're ordinary beings. Obviously you're not Aryas. If you're Aryas, then you agree with me. Okay, anyway, so yeah, the Four Noble Truths, four facts seen as true by Aryas, by extraordinary beings, those who have the direct perception of emptiness. Okay, so the truth of suffering, the truth of the origin, the truth of the cessation of that origin, and therefore the cessation of suffering. Likewise, you stop the cause, then also the result will stop. And then the truth of the path to that cessation. Oh yeah, okay, so that's what I was saying. So the Buddha said, this is suffering, which is true for an Arya. This is the origin, which is true for an Arya. This is cessation, which is true for an Arya. And this is the path, which is true for an Arya. Okay. I can't remember the exact terms here, but anyway, there's 12, I think that you talk about the 12 repetitions. Debachuni, I think it's 12 repetitions. So the things he went through the 3 times, and each time was a little bit different. So the first time through, where he said, this is suffering, which is true for an Arya. Like I said, I can't imagine that the Buddha just said that and that was it. He must have explained what he meant, right? So in other words, he would, let's assume anyway. So the Buddha would have said, this is true. This is suffering, which is true for an Arya. And he would have explained, this is what I'm talking about. This is suffering. This and this and this is suffering. Okay, so he would have pointed out what he thought was, suffering, something we need to get rid of. Something we need to get rid of. Anyway, so he said, so this is, so he would have explained what he meant by suffering. Then this is the origin, which is true for suffering. So it's true for an Arya. So he would have explained, what that origin is. I mean, it's karma and the mental afflictions. So he would explain. So this is the origin of that suffering. Where does it come from? From karma, the mental afflictions. So he would explain that. And then this is the cessation, which is true for an Arya. So talking about the possibility of like a complete extinction, complete annihilation, if you like, of suffering along with its causes. And then this is the path, which is true for an Arya. So you'd have talked about the kind of, the path, in general, the path you need to follow in order to reach that cessation of suffering and its causes. So that's the first repetition. This is suffering true for an Arya. This is the origin true for an Arya. This is the cessation true for an Arya. This is the path true for an Arya. Then the second time through, he said, suffering is to be known. The origin is to be abandoned. The cessation is to be achieved. And the path is to be practiced. So in other words, he was saying, it's a bit like, okay, so now I've explained these things to you. What are you going to do? What you need to do with them is, in the case of suffering, you need to understand it. In other words, I've explained, now you need to really meditate on what I've said and see it for yourself, understand for yourself just what cyclic existence is, and to see how it's really, it's in the nature of suffering. In other words, when we say cyclic existence, what we're talking about is just suffering, nothing but suffering. As long as we're in cyclic existence, then we're not going to have anything but suffering. There's always going to be something wrong. There's always going to be something. Okay, so suffering is to be known. Then the origin is to be abandoned. So, now you've understood that the suffering nature of cyclic existence. Well, where does it come from? Well, it comes from the karma and the mental afflictions. And the karma and mental afflictions you have to get rid of. Well, that's obvious, because you want to get rid of suffering. So, of course, you have to get rid of the karma and the mental afflictions, which are the cause of that suffering. And you might think, well, if you say suffering is to be known, then the origin is to be, like abandoned, literally abandoned, got rid of. Well, we also want to get rid of suffering, don't we? Yeah, but we do want to get rid of it, but that would be a bit like putting the cart before the horse. I mean, it's like you want to get rid of, if you do want to get rid of your suffering, but really what you need to get rid of is the cause of suffering. I don't know if that makes sense, but anyway, that's the general idea. It's almost like if you were to say straight away, you know, suffering is to be abandoned, or it's like, well, of course it's to be abandoned. Of course I need to get rid of it. But the main thing is, you know, look at the cause. Where does it come from? Then get rid of that. If you get rid of the cause, then you're going to get rid of the result. If you get rid of the cause of suffering, you'll get rid of suffering. You won't have to suffer anymore. Then just, you know, that would be very nice. Okay. So the origin is to be abandoned, to be given up, to be got rid of. I think in an ordinary English is to be gotten rid of. You have to get rid of it. Then the second time round, what he said about the truth for cessation is that truth for cessation is something that you need to achieve. It's to be achieved. So it's something you need to achieve. Something you have to achieve. Yeah, that's pretty straightforward, isn't it? So that's now. So in other words, having talked about true cessation, you know, so what are you meant to do with that knowledge? Well, now you know about true cessation, the true cessation, you have to achieve it. But then you're going to be thinking, well, yeah, but how? Well, with the second time through with the truth of the path, then the Buddha said the path is to be practiced. So if you, because you need to achieve the cessation, then you need to practice the path, which can lead to that cessation. Okay. So that was the second set of 4 repetitions. If we talk about 12 repetitions, Tepachuni. I think that's the expression, Tepachuni, 12 repetitions. So then what about the third time round then? And it's, I don't know if seems a bit odd to me, but it's apparently maybe the Buddha taught it on several occasions and sort of put it slightly differently, different times. Because it seems that one version of the next set of repetitions has it that for the truth of suffering, because the second time around the Buddha said the suffering is to be known, right? So then there's one way of putting when you go through the third set of 4, it's like the Buddha said, suffering is known. But recently I heard it put a little bit differently. It's like the Buddha said, you know, I have understood suffering. So, you know, suffering is to be known means what you need to do is you need to understand suffering. So he was stating, you know, I understand suffering. I've understood suffering. I have understood suffering. And then likewise with the truth of the origin, I have abandoned it. So you might see it stated in some teachings on the 4 Noble Truths that the Buddha said, suffering is, the cessation has been achieved. Sorry, the origin has been abandoned. The origin has been abandoned. It's like, it's kind of strange. You need to understand it. Sorry, I'm getting mixed up with the truth of the origin. You know, you need to abandon it. You've abandoned it. It's like, what's he talking about? So according to this, recently, it's more like I have abandoned it. You need to abandon it. I have abandoned it. Then with the truth of cessation, where he was saying, you know, the truth of cessation is to achieve. The third time through, he's saying, I have achieved it. And then with the truth of the path, where he said it is to be practiced, you need to practice it. then the Buddha said, I have practiced this path. So then if you think about what the significance of that is, it's a bit like, inspiring confidence. The person who's teaching you this, I've already done this, I've been there, I've done this. So I think it's like that. But there's another way, a completely different version of the last four. And this also, I think, has a couple of interpretations. But anyway, the third time through, the Buddha said suffering is not to be known. The origin is not to be abandoned. The cessation is not to be achieved, or is not to be achieved, or maybe is not achieved. Then the path is not to be practiced. So one way that I've heard His Holiness explain this, His Holiness Dalai Lama, is what he's saying the third time is, yes, the truth of suffering is to be known. Yeah, yes, you do need to know it, but not ultimately, not inherently, if you like. Conventionally you need to know it, but ultimately you can't know it. Then likewise with the truth of the origin, it is to be abandoned. You do need to abandon it. You do need to get rid of it, but only conventionally. Ultimately, it's not something that can be given up. So it's talking about its ultimate nature, the ultimate nature of suffering, and the ultimate nature of the origin of suffering. And so likewise for the truth of the cessation and the truth of the path, the truth of cessation, yes, you need to achieve it. Conventionally, it is something that needs to be achieved, but ultimately, it ultimately doesn't exist. So for sure, it is not something to be achieved ultimately. The truth of the path is not something that can be practiced ultimately. So like that. I think, yeah, I think that's good. Good timing. I just noticed we have a couple of hands up, and the first one's in the queue are Brian and Shana, or Brian or Shana.
Would that be him talking about the true nature of the I, like that there is no I, that's why is that what the
Yeah,
fourth?
I think so. I mean, yeah, I mean, the thing is, well, when we talk about the true nature of the I, but that reality is also applicable to everything which exists, right? So in other words, just like we can talk about the true nature of the I, then you can also talk about the true nature of each of the four truths.
Right.
Yeah.
Dependent
Yeah.
origination, like, or
Yeah, I mean, it's all connected for sure. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, like the truth of suffering isn't it can't be known ultimately because it doesn't exist ultimately, and why it doesn't exist ultimately is because actually it's something which exists dependent on other factors, so it can't exist ultimately. Yeah. Then Teresa.
You might have just answered my question. Let's see. I think I'm getting hung up on has been abandoned, can't abandon it. Anyway, I'm just wondering, so you have such good metaphors and examples. I really appreciate them. Thank you so much. And this very last point that you were just making, that I don't even think I can wrap my brain around it enough to give an example, but like, or to say it, like this idea of it can't be abandoned. I don't know. Do you have a metaphor or an example for that? You were saying the Dalai Lama gives us this example. I can't wrap my head around it. Maybe I just won't be able to, and that's okay.
Well, I think it's really all along the lines of I mean, we could say about anything. When we say something exists, we might want to expand on that by saying, you know, it exists conventionally, but not ultimately. So I think that all of these four would come down to, like in the case of the truth of suffering exists, but not ultimately. So you need to know it, but it's not ultimately something that can be known because it doesn't exist ultimately. Because it doesn't
Okay.
exist ultimately, you can't know it ultimately. You can't know an ultimately existing suffering. You can't abandon an ultimately existing origin because such a thing doesn't exist.
I
You
got
can't
it.
achieve an ultimately existing cessation because such a thing doesn't exist. You can't practice an ultimately existing path because it doesn't exist. Such a thing doesn't exist. So how can you practice it?
Okay, I got it
Yeah.
for now,
Right.
anyway. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. And then there is a slightly different way in which that kind of that is explained, and the way it goes is, I mean, even though literally it's kind of it sounds a bit strange, but the idea, the way it's explained, is, you know, the second time around the Buddha is saying the suffering is to be known. The third time round, when he's saying it's not to be known, when that's explained, the commentary that goes along with that is that once you've understood it, the work is over. So once you know it, you don't need to. There's no more work to do. You don't need to know anything more because you know it now. Then, you know, it's not like you have to keep going trying to understand something you already understand. It's a bit like that. And then likewise with the truth of the origin, once you've abandoned it, the work is over. You don't need to abandon something you've already abandoned. Then with the truth of cessation, third time round, you know, it is not to be achieved. Meaning, once you've achieved it, you don't have to achieve it again because you've already achieved it. I mean, it's a bit like, you know, what do you call it? Once you put the cat out, you can't put the cat out because you already put the cat out. You don't need to put the cat out once you've already put the cat out, kind of thing. Right. So then, likewise with the truth of the path, you know, the truth of the path is to be practiced. Once you've practiced it, you don't need to practice it again because you've already practiced it. You don't have to go back to the beginning and do it all over again, kind of thing. So that's in general about the truth of the four truths. The four truths. Then I think it'd be good to sort of talk a bit about and think a little bit about the fact that the Buddha did teach. Well, no, I don't mean to say that. You do come across the four truths in many different you know, texts, important texts. And the thing is, well, anyway, the point I want to make, you kind of think that because of the two, cause and effect, what happens first? The cause, right? Then afterwards comes the effect. So why did the Buddha not teach the truth of the origin first, and then the truth of suffering? You know, cause and effect. Why didn't he teach the truth of the path and then the truth of cessation? And it seems that it's really quite important. It's really very important that the Buddha did teach it in the order that he did. I think it's okay to put it like this. It's a bit like you know, somebody comes along and tries to persuade you to take some medicine when you're not even aware that you have that illness, the illness that's the medicine for. You need to be aware that you're ill first before you're going to be interested in taking the medicine, right? So the first thing you need to know is that you have the illness. Once you're convinced you have the illness, then you're going to start wanting to know, well, where does that illness come from? Because it requires a bit of intelligence, of course. Like the thing is that we all know that if you're ill, then you need to find out where that illness comes from, because otherwise you're working with the symptoms instead of the real illness. So you want to find the medicine that's going to actually deal with the illness itself and not just the symptoms. You see what I mean? Does that make sense? I'm not sure. In fact, anyway, so it's very often the case that, I mean, just like with the refuge, we talked about, and in fact, right at the beginning of the text, the attitude, the best attitude to have when you're learning about the Buddha's teachings is to think of yourself as a sick person. And, the Buddha is the teacher. Sorry, the Buddha is the teacher anyway. The Buddha is like the doctor who diagnoses your illness and then gives you the medicine, which is the Dharma, that kind of thing. The Dharma teaching is like the medicine. Actually, being cured means taking the medicine. So actually putting what the Buddha taught into practice. So it's like that here. So for that reason, it's not unusual to compare the truth of suffering to the illness. But I'm not quite sure that's the right word. It seems to me, I'm not very sure, but it seems like because when we're aware that we're ill is when we're experiencing the symptoms, isn't it? So then you go to the doctor and say, what's wrong with me? And I mean, and of course, really what you're asking is, can you tell me what's wrong with me? And can you give me the medicine that's going to cure it, right? So it's the first thing you're aware of is the symptoms, right? You would have no idea about the illness unless you're experiencing the symptoms, right? So it seems to me like when we talk about the truth of suffering, it's more like the truth of suffering is like the symptoms. And even the symptoms you might not have been aware of. That's the point, because as we will see, the truth of suffering, they talk about three types, right? There's to use the general terms, the suffering of change, and the suffering of what do you call the pervasive suffering of conditioning. So the second two are things that you wouldn't even be aware of. Or even if you were aware of them, you wouldn't think there was anything wrong. You think it's very nice, in fact, but so the truth of the suffering of suffering, that's the one where, it's like this, the suffering of pain and so forth, right? Suffering of pain, headaches, abscess, toothache, and stuff like that. So anyway, I don't know. What I'm trying to say is that if we say that the truth of suffering is the illness, then what would you call, in terms of the analogy of the illness, what would you call the origin of suffering? The truth of suffering is the illness. So in that case, what is the truth of the origin of suffering?
The cause of the illness.
Somebody said something, but I didn't hear properly.
Maybe the cause.
Oh, Talia.
The cause
I didn't
of
hear you
the-
properly. Sorry.
It's all right, the cause of the illness, like the process underlying it.
Is that what we would say? So there's the illness. So you go to the doctor saying, I feel ill, I'm feeling ill. And then the doctor says, this is the, what were the words you used? What would they say?
Well, I said cause, but that sounds like another truth to me, so.
Yeah, well, anyway, so they probably, well, we talk about the diagnosis, don't we? And the diagnosis is kind of like the doctor is saying to you, oh, this is what you've got wrong with you. So, well, actually, a good one would be like, you're getting dizzy spells. So that's the illness. You go to the doctor and say, like I keep getting these dizzy spells, and the doctor, that could be the result of any of a number of causes. Like, for example, there could be something wrong with your brain that's causing it. It could be simply some kind of virus in the sinuses. So that's why I keep going back to the symptoms. It's like my dizzy spells. That's like, anyway, I'm feeling bad. I'm feeling kind of weird. I keep getting these dizzy turns. What's wrong with me? This is what's wrong with you. So in other words, what's wrong with you is it's a virus, or I think it's a virus, and this is what you have to do to recover. Just give it time or whatever. Or maybe, okay, so we're going to do a scan, and okay, so you got something wrong with your brain, so we have to do a brain operation. Whatever. Anyway, I think that we don't need to keep talking about this, but it's something for me, it's something to think about, because I don't really know what to, if I'm going to call the truth of suffering the illness, the sickness, the illness, then the truth of origin must be, it's like, what's really wrong with you? What's really wrong with you? When you know what's really wrong with you, then you know what it is that's causing that illness that you're experiencing. So anyway, and that's actually quite good, maybe, because in the case of the truth of suffering, the truth of origin, what we become aware of is these different is the suffering of the suffering of change, the suffering of the pervasive suffering. But what's really wrong with us is the karma and the mental afflictions. That's what's really wrong with us. So maybe it's like that. I have to think about what the anyway, okay, maybe we can leave it like that. But I know maybe it's not too important, but something I often think about. Okay, so that's really it. It's something to think about, but otherwise I think it's fairly straightforward. If you just think of yourself, and your own experience of illnesses and so on, just being told by somebody you need to take this medicine when you're not even aware that you're ill doesn't make sense. You need to be convinced that you're ill first, and then when the person then if somebody starts telling you this is why you're experiencing that, and this is what you have to do if you want to get rid of it, then that kind of order makes much more sense. And also something that Lama Tsongkhapa talks about, so I mean, maybe we don't need to go through word by word, but Lama Tsongkhapa also deals with the question that might come up. Well, since when you think about suffering, once you're convinced about it, then the first thing you're thinking about is, I want to be free of this. So in other words, the first thing that you think about after suffering is the cessation. So why not teach that next? So Lama Tsongkhapa makes the point that although it is true that that once you've understood suffering, that the first thing you want is to get rid of that suffering. That wish to get rid of that suffering, which is in a way, it's like the wish to achieve cessation, is nothing like the wish to achieve cessation when you've understood where the suffering comes from and that it's possible to get rid of those causes. So that's why the truth of cessation comes third. So this is the suffering which is, this is suffering which is true for an Arya. Where that comes from is the origin, which is true for an Arya, karma, the mental afflictions. And so at that point, you'll when you're thinking about how suffering is to be abandoned, you're thinking about is something you need to abandon. You're thinking about the nature of those causes and whether there is, generally the possibility that something could get rid of them. That whether there is an antidote, if you like, to the poison, to the illness. And once you've seen that it is possible, then you have this much stronger wish based upon that understanding, not just like, well, wouldn't it be nice? I mean, of course, everybody would like to, all sorts of things, like especially, an end to suffering where you don't have to do anything. But, like, okay, wow, it's really, yeah, I think it's true. It's possible. There is such a thing as, the wisdom that will completely free you from all of that. Then, based upon that understanding, this kind of like overwhelming, burning desire to achieve that liberation, which is possible. That's where that comes. That's why that comes third. And then once you have that, then of course, nothing else you want to do more than to practice the path that's actually going to lead to that. Okay. So I think that'll do for today. So thank you, everybody, and we'll finish with some dedication prayers. I'm not quite sure what we have, Michael. Anyway, let's just go through all of the dedication prayers that we have. Thank you. Coming up.
Is that not showing up for you?
No. Is it showing up for anybody? Yes, but not me. I wonder why. Oh, I know. I bet I know why. It's because I dragged this across. Yeah, now I can see it. So I could see everybody. It was covering it up. May the precious supreme bodhicitta not yet born arise. May that arisen not decline, but increase more and more. Oh, I better get rid of this now. Due to all the past, present, and future merits collected by me and all the merits of the 3 times collected by numberless Buddhas and numberless sentient beings, may bodhicitta be generated in the hearts of all the sentient beings of the 6 realms, and especially in the hearts of everybody in this world, including all the students, benefactors, and volunteers in the FPMT organization. May it be generated in the hearts of all those who rely upon me, all those for whom I have promised to pray, and all those whose names have been given to me. May it be generated in my heart and in the hearts of all my family members, those who are living and those who have died. May the bodhicitta that has already been generated increase. Incomparably kind and supreme Tenzin Gyatso, the wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, may you have a long life and all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. I fully dedicate all these virtues to be able to train just like the hero Manjushri who knows reality, and just like Samantha Bhadra as well. I fully dedicate all my roots of virtue with the dedication praised as the best by all the gone beyond victorious ones of the 3 times in order to have good conduct. Due to this virtue, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead all transmigratory beings without exception to that state. Can you go back again? Oh, I see. It's just that there's no gap between the emptiness and as. Okay, yeah, keep going, please. Due to past, present, and future merits collected by me, the numberless Buddhas and the numberless sentient beings which are completely empty of existing from their own side, may I, who am completely empty of existing from my own side, achieve the state of full enlightenment which is completely empty of existing from its own side, and lead all sentient beings who are completely empty of existing from their own side to that state which is completely empty of existing from its own side, by myself alone, who am completely empty of existing from my own side. As long as any sentient being has not been liberated from samsara, may I abide in samsara to help them, even though I achieve highest enlightenment. By merely seeing, hearing, thinking about, or remembering me, as well as by touching me or talking to me, may all suffering instantly be pacified, and may there be happiness forever. So this is the prayer for the swift return of Lamas of Rinpoche. Peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious one, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you I make request. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the 3 jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. Okay, thank you. See you all. Let's see if I can get you back again.